Good evening, everybody. So I am progressing quite quickly through my December and early January TBR, and with this progress comes a list of top 23 books in 2023. I had originally made a top 10 list, but then with the recent books I've been reading, I figured I would just update the list that I made to include some books that might have been honorable mentions in my original list in the main list, and also include some of the books that I finished reading or am currently in the middle of that I'm really enjoying. So at number 1 is Remarkably Bright Creatures by Shelby Von Pelt. So in this book, the 3 main characters, 3 human and 1 animal, deal with grief in various ways. And the reason why I have this book at number 1 is because I have dealt with grief quite a bit this year, so I can relate to how the characters felt in this book very strongly. So this character, the main character in this book loses her son, and she deals with her grief by volunteering at an aquarium. And one of the other characters in this book is actually the octopus who's in the aquarium, and he's grieving the loss of being away from the other animals in the ocean, which I think is a pretty cool and interesting concept. So at number 2 on my list is The Notebook by Nicholas Sparks. My friend Anna over at Anna's Drawing Channel and I have been discussing books together since April, and this book was our book for May. So The Notebook came out in 2003. The movie with Ryan Gosling and Rachel McAdams came out in 2004. It's a love story about a couple named Noah and Allie. Allie is kind of resistant to being in love with Noah at first, and he kind of pursues her and badgers her. So their relationship doesn't really start off too great, but then it progresses to get better. And so spoiler alert for those of you who have never read this book, I hate to spoil the ending, but basically in the end, Noah is going to the nursing home to read the notebook that he kept about their relationship to her because she's dying of Alzheimer's disease. And I was able to really connect to Noah because it made me think of my grandparents when my grandmother was dying of Alzheimer's, and my grandfather, who passed away in January 2020, would go to the nursing home every day to visit her. And just that wholesome relationship reminded me so much of my grandparents, who I miss. My grandmother passed away from Alzheimer's in September 2014, and as I just said, my grandfather passed away in 2020. The next book at number 3 on my list is Friends, Lovers, and the Big Terrible Thing, Matthew Perry's memoir. So this book kind of caused me a lot of issues because I was trying to get in touch with Matthew Perry to interview him about his book for the past 5 or 6 months, and all of those attempts to reach him did not end up too well because his social media profiles kept getting hacked into, and it was really frustrating. So I eventually gave up and decided to take a loss because I figured I was never actually going to get to talk to him. And then, of course, he sadly passed away on October 28th. So I will never get the chance to interview him and ask him the questions that I had about his book tour, his experience on Friends, his experience being in a Broadway play. I will never get the opportunity to talk to him about that, so that's kind of a bummer. But Yeah, the reason why I chose to read Matthew Perry's biography this year was because I grew up watching Friends. It started airing when I was 9. It the finale aired when I was 18 and about to graduate high school, so I was able to connect to the characters in the finale episode where they were like moving forward with their lives and starting new journeys, because that's where I was in my life at that time with getting ready to go to college. At number 4 in my list is Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmis. I read this book at the end of August and beginning of September. I do not have a physical copy with me because I borrowed my mother's copy to read the book over the summer. My aunt recommended this book to me on Memorial Day weekend, and I loved the topic of women's empowerment in this book. It's set in the 1960s, and it's about a female scientist who comes into her own in the 1960s and has to do a lot of powering through to stand up to herself against the men in the television industry because they don't think that she can actually successfully run her own show about chemistry. And if you have seen the Apple TV Plus series of Lessons in Chemistry, please leave a comment below to let me know what you think about it. My favorite character in Lessons in Chemistry was probably the main character's daughter, Mad, who's about 8 years old. She has to do a family tree project, and she has to find out information about her dad, who passes away before she was born. So I just love the whole plot about how she finds out about how her dad passed away and what happened to him. There is a trigger warning in this book that I wanted to warn people about, because there's a section that's kind of at the beginning of the book that's really hard to get through, that's about abuse, and those chapters are really hard to get through. I mean, it was hard for me to read, and I know that when Anna read the book, she told me she had trouble getting through those chapters too. And also there's a character death because the main character's husband dies. So I just wanted to make people aware of those trigger warnings. So the next book that comes in at number 5 is one of the first books that I finished that's on my TBR list for December and early January, is Cinder by Marissa Meyer. It's the first book in the Lunar Chronicle series, and basically what this series is a modern retelling of fairy tales with more of a sci-fi twist, because it's set in like 2100 in New Beijing, which is like a fictionalized version of China, I think. And there's also like an outbreak of a disease. And honestly, when I was reading about the outbreak of the disease, it made me think of COVID-19. Not gonna lie about that. So I really liked the writing in this book, and it kept me hooked and wanting to read more and being unable to put the book down. I started this book last Thursday and I finished it on Monday. So it took me about 3 or 4 days to read it, which is pretty typical. That's usually how long it takes me to read a book, unless it's really long. For example, like the one of the next books I'm going to talk about, Renegades, I'm like a quarter of the way through that right now. That's at number 15 on my list, so we'll get to that in a few minutes. Renegades is also by Marissa Meyer, and as I just said, I will talk about that in a few minutes. The next book I wanted to talk about is Midnight Sun by Stephanie Meyer. This is the book that Anna and I reviewed together in July. So to be honest, I was more preferable to Harry Potter because I grew up with those books. The Twilight books came out when I graduated college. So, it took me a while to get into really liking those movies as much as I liked Harry Potter. But so Midnight Sun is basically the Twilight books from Edward Cullen's perspective, the vampire. So I really thought that Stephanie Meyer did a good job with this book, and it really also does a good job of developing the members of Edward's family much better. Like, out of all of Edward's family members, I think my favorite member of his family is probably Esme or Alice. And it was really cool to see Twilight from Edward's perspective, because the rest of the Twilight books are from Bella's perspective. And my friend Kate and I were talking yesterday when we were out running errands about Twilight and how certain aspects of those books haven't really aged very well in the current time that we live in, including how Edward pretty much stalks Bella and watches her sleep. Like, I always really thought that was creepy. And even when the books and movies first came out, I was really put off and creeped out by that. So number 7, I do not have the physical book here because I just returned it to the library yesterday. It's 19 Minutes by Jodi Picoult. My friends and I are going to be having a discussion about this book in February, so I don't want to spoil it. As far as Jodi Picoult's writing goes, she does a really good job of really capturing emotional scenes. So this book is basically about a school shooting and the emotions that the members of a small community goes through, including the kid who commits the crime of the shooting. So I don't want to provide any spoilers for the rest of my friends who are reading this book. So I'm not going to say anything more about it for right now. Just that it's really powerful. The next book I wanted to talk about is The Enchanted Hacienda by J.C. Cervantes. So when you think of what happens in this book, the theme about it is centered around magical realism and like a witch doctor in training. So when you think of magical realism, think of 1,000 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, or the Disney movie Encanto. And the themes of magical realism are also in this book too. So if you're a fan of Encanto, I think you will really like this book a lot. The next book I wanted to talk about is I'm Glad My Mom Died. Now, I am definitely out of the age demographic for the Disney Channel shows that Jeanette McCurdy was in. The thing that attracted me so much to this book was actually a documentary that I watched on YouTube on the channel of Blame It on Jorge, and he did like a 45-minute documentary YouTube video about the guy Dan Schneider who directed Sam and Cat, Drake and Josh, iCarly, Victorious, and the Amanda Show. And basically how he was really creepy towards the teenage actresses on his TV shows. And Jeanette McCurdy talks about this in her book. She doesn't refer to Dan Schneider by name. I think she just refers to him as the director, I think. So she also talks about how she was abused by her mom as a child. And it's just really sad. Like, the thing about these documentaries, about memoirs, about celebrities, is that when you're watching a show or a movie, you never really think about what the actors in the show, like Matthew Perry or Jeanette McCurdy or even John Stamos or Britney Spears, who I'm going to talk about when I talk about their books in a little bit, are going through behind the scenes. And that's what makes reading their biographies so powerful and attracts me to reading the biographies in the first place. Speaking of biographies, here's another one. This book is called Directed by James Burrows. So this book is a memoir of the guy who directed Friends, Frasier, Will and Grace, Mike and Molly, The Mary Tyler Moore Show. He basically directed shows for like 5 decades. So no matter what age you are, you probably watched a show that James Burrows directed when you were younger. Like as I was mentioning when I was talking about Friends, Lovers, and the Big Terrible Thing, I grew up watching Friends, but I also watched Will and Grace and Frasier, and later on, Mike and Molly. Mike and Molly aired when I was in college, so I used to watch that a lot at night in my dorm room when I was not studying. So the cool thing about this book is that it really goes into behind the scenes about what goes on in the making of a TV show, and they even have like bits and pieces of the script in here from the pilot episodes of different shows. So I wanted to read an excerpt briefly. Let me find it. This is from the Friends section. Where is it? All right, so this scene of dialogue is from the pilot episode of Friends. They're all in Central Perk talking about Monica's upcoming date with Paul the wine guy. This is not even a date. It's not. It's just two people going out to dinner and not having sex. Sounds like a date to me. Why would anybody do something like that? I assume we're looking for an answer more sophisticated than to get you into bed. Let's put it this way. Were you especially attentive last night, especially selfless and giving? You know, making a little extra efforts because it was all about him. I hate men. I hate men. So, basically, in those two scenes of dialogue, the first scene takes place before her date with Paul the wine guy, and then the second one takes place after her date with Paul the wine guy, when she's lamenting to her friends about how bad the date went and how bad the sex was. So Friends aired when I was 9 years old, so stuff like this definitely went over my head as a third grader. I watched the show with my parents when I was younger, but then as I was older, I watched it by myself. And when the show first was airing, the audience was polled asking if Monica was a slut because of her situation with Paul the wine guy. And now in 2023, as an adult in my mid-30s, I can definitely say that yes, Monica was definitely kind of a slut. As much as I love Courtney Cox, I would have to say that she definitely was a slut. So coming in at number 11 on my list is Our Missing Hearts by Celeste Nig. Celeste Nig is the author who wrote Little Fires Everywhere, which has a series on Netflix. This book, Our Missing Hearts, is about a little boy who's about 11 or 12 years old, and he goes on a search to find his mother who abandoned him, and it's a very sweet family. It's a very sweet story about a broken family who tries to get repaired. It's really very good. Also, please leave a comment if you have seen the TV show of Little Fires Everywhere, because I want to look it up on Netflix and see if it's any good. So at number 13 on my list. Number 12. Number 12 is Kishin Kosher. I just returned this book to the library yesterday. It's a very sweet coworkers to lovers story about two young adults from feuding families. One kid from the family gets sent into the competitor's bakery to spy on them and infiltrate a secret recipe. Think kind of like Mr. Krabs and Plankton from SpongeBob. Ethan is Plankton, and Avatal, the girl character, is Mr. Krabs. And Avatal is the person who Ethan is trying to steal the recipe from, to give to his grandfather. So Avatal and Ethan butt heads at the beginning, but then they form a really sweet bond and a really sweet relationship. And Avatal has chronic pain. So there's a real no. Here's a spoiler briefly. So there's a scene in the book where they're trying to get intimate, but it doesn't go well. And Avatal kind of has a flare-up of her chronic pain in the middle of trying to get intimate. And she ends up in the bathroom crying and having an anxiety attack. And Ethan basically sits with her in the bathroom and helps her work through her anxiety and comforts her. And I just thought that was really very sweet. The next book I wanted to talk about is Hamnet. So what's cool about this book is that it's a historical fiction that is set in Shakespearean times. And it's about Shakespeare's family. And this book was really educational for me because it's also about like what inspired the play Hamnet. And I don't want to spoil too much about this book. If you plan to read it, I just want to say that it's really good. Destiny, I know this is on your TBR for 2024. You should definitely read it. It's very good. The next book is Pineapple Street by Jenny Jackson. I read this book at the beginning of the summer. It's about a socialite family from the Hamptons in New York. And it's basically about the three sisters in the rich family and how they navigate different relationships. My favorite character is probably the youngest sister, Georgia, because she was the easiest character for me to relate to, probably because she's closer to me in personality. The next book, we're almost halfway through the list, guys. The next book is Renegades by Marissa Meyer. I am a quarter of the way through this book, currently on page 433, and there are 52 pages. So this is a superhero book, so if you are a fan of the Marvel superhero movies like I am, you are going to love this book. This is the first in a 3-book series, so I can't wait to read the rest of the series because this book has been impossible for me to put down. I'm reading like 5 or 6 other books right now. This book has been impossible for me to pull myself away from because when I read it, I feel like I'm in the middle of either the Avengers or Spider-Man or a Captain America movie. It's just so good. So if you are a fan of the Marvel movies, please read this book. It's really, really great. Number 16 is The Light We Carry. So this is Michelle Obama's second memoir that she came out with during COVID-19. Her first memoir, Becoming, is also very good. She came out with this memoir during COVID, and what makes it so relatable is what we all went through during COVID isolation, and she talks a lot about mindfulness and being grateful, which I think is a really great message for everybody to listen to. So if you get the chance to read this or listen to the audiobook of it, I recommend that you do so. Highly. Next up is a book I just got for Christmas that I am loving. I got this from my sister for Christmas. And also my mother-in-law. So I grew up in the 90s and early 2000s, so I was a huge fan of Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera and NSYNC and stuff like that. So when I found out that Britney Spears was coming out with a biography, I was so excited. So I'm about halfway through this book right now, I think. I'm on chapter 19, page 117. And if you were a fan of Britney Spears, you are going to love this book. It really makes you think, like, about what goes on behind the scenes, and it really makes me think especially about what she's been through with her conservatorship, with how her family was so strict with her and everything. And it makes me view her music very differently. And I think I'm going to start listening to some of her songs again, especially I'm Not a Girl, Not Yet a Woman, Overprotected, I'm a Slave for You, Lucky. I mean, maybe I'm a Slave for You isn't really a good example, but Lucky is, because if you think of the lyrics of Lucky, she says, if there is nothing missing in my life, then why do these tears come at night? And you don't really think about what's going on behind the scenes in a person's life when you listen to a song like that. Like, when that CD came out, the Oops, I Did It Again CD, I was in 10th grade, I think. And, like, I didn't know anything about what was going on in her personal life. I didn't really care much, even though I read the celebrity trash magazines all the time when I was bored, and I still do. But the thing that attracted me to that song was, like, the music video. But I think if you go back and listen to that song or watch the music video on YouTube now, you would view it very differently based on knowing what she has been through for her whole entire life. And it makes you really hurt for her. And I'm really glad she is out of that situation. The next book I wanted to talk about is How to Walk Away by Catherine Center. I have been on a kick this year of reading books with disabled protagonists in them. So basically in March, Matt and I reviewed a bunch of children's books for the entertainment blog. That is in our March wrap-up video, I think. I actually don't remember if we posted a video reviewing those books. But another book I read that was geared towards, like, later elementary school kids is Learning to Fly, which is by Ali Stroker, the Broadway actress in a wheelchair who won the Tony Award a couple of years ago for playing Adu Annie in Oklahoma. That book is about a girl who's in a community theater production of Wicked, and she's in a wheelchair, and basically she talks about her experiences with doing theater and her experiences with like her challenges with being in a wheelchair and acting. And how this connects to the book that I'm talking about now, How We Walk Away, is basically the main character, Maggie. She is going on her honeymoon or some kind of vacation, and her fiance, who is piloting the plane, crashes it and causes her to be a paraplegic in a wheelchair. So what makes How to Walk Away a very powerful story is that basically in the whole book, she's going through recovering from her injury and the ups and downs of dealing with physical therapy. And she also kind of develops a romantic relationship with her physical therapist, which is really very sweet. And one thing that pissed me off about this book was the fact that the parents never got any, like, financial settlements against the guy who caused the plane crash. Like, he walked away from everything scot-free when he probably should have been sued. And my friend Kate and I actually were talking about that the other day. She agrees with me that he should have been sued, or they should have gotten some kind of restitution from him from all the suffering, or that he should have contributed towards paying for Maggie's medical bills. The next book at number 19 is Love Theoretically by Ali Hazelwood. I read this in late October, early November, right around close to Thanksgiving. And this is like a STEM romance. Like, think the TV show The Big Bang Theory. The characters in this book are very similar to them, because they are in science. I think they're like in chemistry, or like, I don't know what kind of science it is. I don't remember what field of science. But basically, the main character, Elsie, is a student at MIT, and she falls in love with another student named Jack. And Destiny Sidwell and Sarah Caroli have also reviewed this book on their channel, and they have both said that they love Jack's character and think he's really sweet, and I could not agree with them more about their analysis of Jack. I thought that he was really sweet, that he was really kind to Elsie, and that he was really supportive of her. They are probably my favorite couple in a book that I've read this year. Let me see. The other couple that I liked was probably Avital and Ethan in Kissing Kosher. And also, in my next book, which is another holiday-themed book, Lovelight Farms is set in like November, around Thanksgiving, and the story is set in a fictional town. And you know what? I'm just going to read you the description. A pasture of dead trees, a hostile takeover of the Santa barn by a family of raccoons, and shipments that have mysteriously gone missing. Lovelight Farms is not the original winter wonderland of Stella Bloom's dreams. In an effort to save the Christmas tree farm she's loved since she was a kid, Stella enters a contest with Instagram famous influencer Evelyn St. James. When the added publicity and a $1,000 cash prize, Stella might just be able to save the farm from its financial woes. There's just one problem. To make the farm seem like a romantic destination for the holidays, she lied on the application and said she owns Lovelight Farms with her boyfriend, only there is no boyfriend. Enter her best friend, Luke Peters. He just stopped by for some hot chocolate and somehow got a farm and a serious girlfriend in the process. But fake dating his best friend might be the best Christmas present he's ever received. So, as the description says, this book has the fake dating trope, and it's like best friends to lovers. And the buildup of Luca's relationship with Stella is very sweet. And as I was just saying, my top 3 favorite book couples are, actually, I have top 4. Charlie and Nora from Book Lovers, Luca and Stella from this book, Jack and Elsie from Love Theoretically, and there's one more. And Avital and Ethan from Kissing Kosher. So yes, I can definitely highly recommend Lovelight Farms, and Kissing Kosher. I can't really say if I would call that a holiday book, but I just read it because I'm trying to learn more about Jewish culture and the kind of things that Jewish people do for Hanukkah. Although there's not a lot of Hanukkah mentioned in this book, but it's set during Christmas time, I guess. So, number 21 is If You Could Have Told Me by John Stamos. This was another memoir that I was very excited to receive for Christmas. I got it from my aunt and uncle. So if you don't already know this, aside from Friends, one of my favorite TV shows growing up was Full House, and Uncle Jesse was always my favorite character. So I was very excited to read John Stamos' memoir because obviously he talks about his experience on Full House in it. I haven't made it that far yet. I'm only on chapter 14, and he hasn't mentioned anything about Full House up to this point, I don't think. Or maybe he has. Maybe. I might be getting to the part where he talks about Full House very soon. But I'm very excited to read more of this book. Right now, I am only on page 117, but I will be getting farther along in it very soon. The next book is Woods Queer. This is another memoir. This was the year of memoirs for me. I have read, counting John Stamos' book and Britney Spears' book. Let's see, how many? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I've read 6 memoirs this year. So this year, my mom's children's book, The Power for Yes, which was a children's book that was a biography of disability rights activist Judith Heumann, won a children's book award at an award ceremony for all authors and illustrators in the state of Maine. This book, Woods Queer by Gretchen Legler, won the award for Best Memoir, written by a Maine author. And basically, this author uses nature as a metaphor to describe her relationship with her wife. So if you are looking for a good LGBTQ plus memoir to read, I can highly recommend this one. And finally, we get to the last book I got for Christmas, which is Roof Over Our Heads by Nicole Kronzer. My mother got me this book for Christmas. I am so far on page 91, chapter 14. So this book, my mother went to a conference in Ohio at the beginning of November, and she got this book autographed for me from the author, and I can show you this. See? Oops. There's a signature. So this book is about a family of actors who live in a historical house in, what state do they live in? Minnesota. So they live in a historical house in Minnesota that puts on like historical immersive events for the community. And basically they're about to lose this house because they're in debt. So I am just getting to the part now where they're trying to brainstorm ideas about how they're going to save the house. And it's a very good book. One thing I can relate to the most in this book is that it's about theater. As you know, this blog is mostly a theater review blog. So whenever I read a book with characters who are either like memoirs by actresses, like the book by the children's book by Ali Stroker that I read earlier this year, or this book, which is about a family of actors. Like, in this book, the main character, Finn, and his brothers are actors in the immersive theater, and their mothers, who are lesbians, are artistic director of the theater and so the mother is an actor in the acting company, and the other mother is a director. And then the three sons, Finn, who is the main character, and his two older brothers are actors in the immersive experience at the historic Victorian house. And I love this book because I'm an actor. I can relate to the character because I do a lot of theater. Like, I've never seen an immersive theater event like that where they dress up in period costumes. But like, I know that one of my friends who I did the PTA play with, he does something similar for the Historical Society in Manchester, New Hampshire, I think. Eric, if you're watching this video, please leave me a comment. I'm pretty sure I have that right, but I'm not completely positive. So yeah, and my honorable mentions are Book Lovers by Emily Henry, Beloved by Toni Morrison, Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Nig, The Bodyguard by Catherine Center, and Learning to Fly by Ali Stroker. So some of these books I decided to read because they came highly recommended from Destiny and Sarah. So I would like to thank Destiny and Sarah for recommending these books to me, and also other books that I'm reading that are still on my TBR for the end of December and beginning of January. So thank you for tuning in and listening to me talk about books for over 30 minutes. If you have read any of these books this year, please leave a comment below with your opinions, and I look forward to hearing from you. Happy New Year, everybody.